I think what the accounts for that final season for Goodison show is that the move was absolutely critical. If the club wants to accelerate, there's no doubt that the owners are ambitious, they're aspirational. If they qualify for Europe, this is where it becomes a bit of a double-edged sword. In UEFA, we've seen both Chelsea and Aston Villa break the 70% rule quite considerably.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Royal Blue Podcast. I am your host Ian Croll, and joining me today for a deep dive into Everton's finances, as well as the Premier League's transition from PSR to SCR and a potential UEFA multi-club headache, we have the price of football expert Kieran Maguire. Kieran, I'm sure it is a busy time of year for you, so thank you for taking the time to join me on the Royal Blue Podcast. How are things? All good?
All good, yes. Sunny outside, so it puts a spring in your step. In theory, it's the start of the cricket season. I don't think anybody's talking about cricket, and there's exciting times in the world of football finance because it's peak reporting period, and we've got those scamps at Chelsea upsetting an awful lot of people as well.
Or certainly upsetting a lot of people on Merseyside, certainly the blue half of Merseyside anyway. So yeah, their accounts certainly make for interesting reading. I don't think I haven't gone into them too much, but I'm sure you've gone through them with a fine-tooth comb and found a couple of interesting things. In terms of today's agenda, Kieran is hopefully going to help me and you, our audience, understand and dissect a big week for Everton, from the final set of accounts at Goodison Park to the potential issues building up around UEFA's multi-club European competition rulebook. Kieran is here to break down exactly where Everton stand under the Friedkin Group. Before we get into it, just a quick shout out for our sponsor, which is NordVPN. We're on board with Nord, and so should you be. The NordVPN app lets you switch your virtual location, allowing you to save money by purchasing flights, hotels, subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price. And if you want to watch a sporting event or a TV show or a film which isn't available in your region, NordVPN allows you to switch your virtual location to a country which is showing you the event. For more information and to get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/EFC. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Kieran, as I mentioned, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you're able to shed some light on some of the topics that we are going to cover today. First off, we've done a podcast ourselves talking about Everton's accounts, which were released a week ago, Tuesday. So just first off, is there any generalisation that you can come from what came from the accounts last week?
I think what the accounts for that final season for Goodison show is that the move was absolutely critical towards the future of Everton Football Club if they want to be competing and challenging at the top table. You take a look at the revenue, it was 3% higher than it was in 2018. 3% over 7 or 8 years. In real terms, it's gone down. That's due to the constraints of operating at Goodison, which is a magnificent stadium as a piece of architecture, as a place for memories and histories. But as a revenue generating body, it was not good. It meant that Everton were effectively benchmarking themselves against Southampton and Forest and Brighton. Whereas if the club wants to accelerate, there's no doubt that the owners are ambitious, they're aspirational. They want Everton to be at that level of club where Europe is a possibility more seasons than not. Then there's something else needs to be done. Manchester United generate 160 million from Old Trafford from matchday sales. Everton's at 20 million. Now, it's a bigger stadium, but it's not 8 times as big a stadium. We've got Liverpool and the 2 North London clubs. Again, Arsenal are close to 150 million, but all generating more than 100 million. And as we transition from one set of cost rules to another, I think it's absolutely essential that the move is A, taking place, and B, is taking place with the opportunity to convert the Hill Dickinson into a multifunction, multi-sport environment. And I know that as a pure football fan, you don't want to hear those words, but there is a business element to football these days, whether we like it or not.
Well, you mentioned that those accounts do fall under a period of time that the club was still at Goodison. So we will come on to Hill Dickinson and maybe what your thoughts and predictions are for the next 12 to 24 months, I guess. In terms of the numbers for these accounts, obviously it was a £8.6 million loss compared to previous years. And, that obviously looks fantastic on the books compared to, like, say, previous years where it's been a hell of a lot more. However, obviously, you strip away that, and we know that the club had some. They sold the women's team, didn't they? Basically, at a price of £49.2 million. So, how much do you think this is kind of a financial recovery from the previous year to just, kind of some financial manoeuvring, I guess, to satisfy PSR?
It was driven by really tough cost control. And again, we want to see a successful Everton on the pitch. I take a look at the wages. We know that footballers' wages in nearly every club have gone up and up and up. Well, they've not at Everton. So again, it means that the club had to fish in a different pond to where the fans want to see them compete, and no doubt the owners want to see them compete as well. So I'm looking at that wage bill. It has come down. And that's a figure of £152 million. It's lower than Wolves. It's lower than Forest. It's lower than Brighton. It's lower than West Ham. It's lower than Leicester, and they were relegated. So I think the club has actually done well. And whilst it's been a little bit too close for comfort at times, to still be in the Premier League and to be able to transition and move to Hill Dickinson and with positivity, I think is an accomplishment in its own right. And I appreciate that some fans might disagree with this, but there's a lot of people at the club who do deserve credit for that, because without that ability to avoid relegation in some of the seasons that we've had in recent years, it's a completely different environment in the Championship, and having wages which, based on my figures, were bottom six. You've got a challenge.
Just in terms of sort of sticking with the sale of the women's team, just for the next one, do you think that the Premier League will? Or is there any concerns from you that the Premier League won't accept this valuation? Is there any risk of retrospective action, like we've seen maybe with other sponsorship deals? I know Manchester City have had issues in the past with regards to that.
I think Everton have some pretty smart people at the club who have also joined the club in recent times, and we've seen Villa sell its women's team to itself. Clearly, there's the benchmark of Chelsea selling their women's team for £200 million, and Everton's is at a far lower value. Whilst it was a sizable game, I think it's around about 49 million. It's still within the realms of that appears to be the going rate. I think it was actually also a smart move to have the women's team move to Goodison itself, because that shows that there is scope for growth. In terms of attendance potential there, whereas Chelsea play at Kings Meadow, and they're normally playing in front of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. Well, Everton have been getting higher crowds than Chelsea on occasions this season. So all of those are positives. And Everton also had to submit their accounts to the Premier League, I believe, by the 31st of December. And I suspect that if there were any queries, we would have heard about them by now. So it's 2 thumbs up rather than 3, would be my assessment. You can never be certain with the Premier League, but there doesn't appear to be any desire to take this further.
In terms of turnover, you've touched on it a little bit. I think the number was 196 or 197 million, roughly around that. In terms of maybe what the future holds, what's a realistic ceiling for Everton's revenue in the next 12 to 24 months? Can we look at a massive increase, or is it just going to be a slow, gradual increase?
I think it's going to be incremental and organic. If Everton get into Europe for next season, I think we could certainly go in excess of 250 million. I'd expect matchday income to certainly to double. I suspect the club will be targeting the thick end of £50 million, because it's not only is there increased capacity, but there is a greater emphasis on the corporate and hospitality sales at individual matches. It's about creating a horrible word. This about creating a campus at Hill Dickinson on match days, so that people arrive earlier and stay later. And we've seen the changes that's made at Spurs. That they estimate that I think that people are on the stadium area for 40 to 50 minutes greater time than they were at the old White Hart Lane. And what are they doing in that 40 to 50 minutes? They're spending money. So, having improved catering, improved options for fans to do things can only act to the benefit of the club. If they qualify for Europe, now this is where it becomes a bit of a double-edged sword. If they qualify for the Europa Conference, I was out with another club not all that long ago, and they said, we don't want to qualify for the conference. We reckon we'll be worse off financially because we have to abide by UEFA's rules as well as those of the Premier League, and we think it will actually have a negative impact upon our budget. As a fan, you don't care. You're watching Everton play in Europe. Doesn't matter whether it's Lithuania or Denmark or Albania or Italy, Germany, Spain. But there is certainly a step up as far as Europa League qualification. You get twice as much money in the Europa League as you do in the Europa Conference, and you get 9 times as much money if Everton manage to get break into the top 5 and pick up that 5th place as far as Champions League. And there is a 99.99% chance, I believe, that it will be an additional place available to Premier League clubs next season in the Champions League. So those extra matches, you got 50,000 people turning up. You look at the yield per match, and it's a horrible, again, these horrible phrases that I'm using. This isn't why we're not in love with football, but Everton were not generating enough money. They were getting £1 million a match at Goodison. They can double, for a European night, potentially they can treble that and move the club forwards.
So you've kind of touched upon one of my points or one of my topics that I wanted to bring up with you with regards to qualifying for Europe. I will come on to that. So basically what you're saying is you spoke to someone from inside a football club and like in the hierarchy, and they kind of suggested to you that we don't want to qualify. Is that what you're saying? Is that right?
Yes, the reason for that is that if you qualify for a UEFA competition, under the UEFA rules, you will be able to spend 70% of your revenues on player costs. Now that's going to be wages, player write-downs, agents' fees, and this thing called amortization. If I sign a player for £50 million on a 5-year contract, he's costing me £10 million a year as far as my cost control is concerned. And yes, you'll get a wee bit more money. But if you're not in Europe and instead you have to apply the Premier League rules, in the Premier League you can spend 85%. So it's 85% of a slightly smaller number because you've not got the benefit of European revenues. But when you actually do the sums, you're better off. So the Europa Conference has become a bit of a poison chalice. And of course, with Manchester City winning the Carabao Cup, City are going to finish in the top 2, I think it's fair to say. So therefore, they're going to be in the Champions League. That means that Europa Conference place is going to drop into the side that finishes probably 7th, if we take a look at what happened last season is concerned. Could even be 8th. But the boardroom, they won't say this because they can't say this. The boardroom was saying, we'd rather be one place lower and not there. because it's not only you've got less money to spend, you've now got Sunday, Thursday in terms of squad management. So you need a bigger squad, you need a stronger squad, so you need to actually spend a bit more money, and you're constrained because you've got to comply with the UEFA rules.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've had heavy debate on with regards to this, the 85% and the 70%, or 85% of the Premier League and 70% of UEFA. In terms of, I guess, threshold to determine whether you're underneath it or anything like that, and if you do break that, I guess, 85% or the 70% of UEFA, what are we looking at in terms of sanctions? Because is there a bit of a financial levy? I think I read that if you, in terms of Premier League, if you stick with that, if you go above the 85% but stay less than 115%, you're probably looking at maybe just financial fines and no sporting sanctions. So that was my understanding of it. I guess I'll actually, is that right, first of all? But is there a case where clubs could just say, well, we'll just break the 85%? And deliberately break the 85%, and we'll take that gamble, we'll take that chance, and make sure we've got that growth for that season, and see where we end up from there, because we know we're not going to get a sporting sanction in terms of point deductions.
You're absolutely right, Ian, and I'm certainly aware of some clubs. They will have done their sum to say, well, okay, if we go up to 115%, it is just going to be effectively, it's going to be a super tax on spending more money on player wages and transfer fees and so on, and there is some sort of clawback in future years, but we'll deal with that in future years, and that gives the club an opportunity to be more competitive. So if you've got owners who are ambitious stroke aspirational, and they feel that there's an opportunity to challenge for Champions League places and all of the benefits that brings, you can spend these additional monies. In UEFA, we've seen both Chelsea and Aston Villa break the 70% rule quite considerably, and they've been fined. So UEFA doesn't want to go down the banning clubs from participation in competitions. It will have some other sanctions as well in terms of transfer activity, but let's get into the Europa League, or let's get into the Champions League and worry about that then. And the other thing to notice with the UEFA rules is that those are based on a calendar year. So if you overspend, let's say that Everton aren't in Europe next season, Friedkin Group say, let's go to 115% for season 26-27, and that would allow Everton to increase its player wage bill by well over £100 million, and therefore again you are able to compete in a different market under those circumstances. If that works out, they get into Europe. They've then got, in season 27-28, you've got six to eight matches in the Champions League, with all of the step-ups that brings, which allows you to absorb some of those higher costs as far as these squad cost ratio rules are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, so will that be added on to future accounts as well? Any fines? Is there any? I haven't seen a number of what Aston Villa or Chelsea have actually been fined by UEFA, but has it been quite considerable?
Yeah, I think it was around about 20 million for Chelsea, and of course they've also had a £10 million fine from the Premier League, and we're awaiting to see what the sanctions will be from the FA as well for their misdemeanours under the old regime. So yes, they are substantial amounts of money, but for a business which is generating, Chelsea are saying they're going to generate close on 700 million for season 25-26, because they had the benefit of the FIFA Club World Cup and they've been in the Champions League as well. It's something which clubs can absorb.
In terms of obviously these rules, PSR and SCR now, which is obviously the Premier League transition into, fans, not just from Everton. I've spoken to Villa fans, I've spoken to Newcastle fans who obviously we spoke about it being in Europe, and they would argue that these rules are just there to keep teams like Everton and teams in that ilk down, and obviously it only really benefits the bigger teams who can generate the most revenue. So I can understand that point of view, but I also on the other hand can understand why there needs to be some sort of regulation, and there can't be just ridiculous amounts of spending. Obviously Newcastle are the richest club in the world in theory. They just can't spend the money. So I get all that. What are the pros and cons from transitioning from PSR to squad cost ratio now, and is there any benefits for the likes of Everton, the likes of Newcastle, the likes of Villa who are getting punished, or how we see it anyway?
Well, it's noticeable that Everton, Villa and Newcastle all chose to vote in favour of the squad cost rules. And if you take a look at the 6 clubs that voted against, which was Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford, I think it was Palace, I think it was Leeds and West Ham and Fulham. Those are all clubs who you would say sort of in the natural hierarchy of football sit below Villa and Newcastle and Everton, all of whom big city clubs. The benefit is that you just look at football costs. So therefore, if you borrowed a lot of money to build or expand the stadium, none of those interest costs go into the new calculation. That's really good for Everton, as far as Hill Dickinson is concerned. Newcastle are looking to either extend St James's Park or move to a new stadium. So that's being dealt with. They benefit. If we take a look at Villa, again, there's talk about Villa moving to a 60,000 seater capacity stadium in the city of Birmingham. So that's the potential benefit. The reason why those clubs voted against was that the historic advantage that the profitability and sustainability rules gave the established middle class of the Premier League compared to clubs that have just been promoted, that disappears. If you recall when Nottingham Forest had a points deduction a couple of years ago, Everton and Brighton and Bournemouth and Fulham and everybody in the Premier League who'd been there for a few years, they were allowed to lose £105 million over 3 years. Forest, who'd only just been promoted, were only allowed to lose 61. So you can see why the clubs that voted against did so, because their biggest fear, if you're a Bournemouth or a Palace or a Brighton fan, your objective at the start of the season is to finish 17th. So if that's where you stand, you'd vote against SCR. I don't count Everton as having that mentality. The owners clearly bought into the club because they do see a more interesting future towards the top end of the division, and they also have the benefit of new stadiums or prospective new stadiums. So that's why they're voting against. At the same time, does it mean that they've got a competitive disadvantage against Manchester City and Liverpool and Manchester United? Yeah, 70% of 700 million is 490. Even if Everton get into Europe and let's say they go to 300 million, 70% of 300 million is 210. Yeah. That means that those established clubs in terms of European participation are starting each season with £250 million or more than £250 million fiscal advantage.
Just going to come on to the multi-club European potential headache that Everton and Roma and the Friedkins may face. But just before I do, just go back to Everton's accounts. Just one question. Obviously, fans are always keen to know how much their clubs have got to spend on players and recruitment. Was there anything in? I mean, obviously Everton don't seem to have been forced to sell players like they have done in recent years, certainly over the past 12 to 18 months. So was there anything that you saw in the accounts? Is there any deficit that maybe needs fixing? I know there's a lot of talk about the interest payments that have been kind of restructured by the Friedkins. I guess what I'm saying is that is there any risk of Everton needing to being forced to sell players this summer?
No. I think Everton, who've paid a heavy price for the missteps of the Mashiri era, In 3 of the last 4 seasons, I'm looking at all the finances here on a spreadsheet in front of me. Everton have had a negative net spend as far as player recruitment is concerned. I think that particular anchor to which the club has had to apply no longer applies. So that's going to work in its favour. It's 6 seasons now since Everton spent more than £100 million, and that's sort of for me that's sort of a benchmark for an average level of spend. Bournemouth has spent more than £100 million in each of the last 3 years, and no disrespect, what they've done, they bought really smartly, but you wouldn't say that Bournemouth are, for want of a better phrase, a big club. So I think Everton have they've worn the sackcloth following the issues under the Mashiri regime. That can now come off, and they're in a much stronger position this summer, as well as the fact that it is the final year of profitability and sustainability. So you'll move to that new environment from the 1st of July.
Okay, well, just to kind of to wrap things up with this potential multi-club headache. So obviously, for context, we know that Dan Friedkin owns both Roma and Everton, and I think it's UEFA's Article 5 prohibits owners from having decisive influence over 2 clubs in the same competition. So we know that there was maybe a potential solution where the Friedkin Group could have submitted shares into a blind trust before the 1st of March, and as far as we know, we know that has not happened. There's been no official announcement. What's your understanding of all this? We know it's affected the likes of Crystal Palace. Nottingham Forest got involved with Crystal Palace and Lyon last season. Now Crystal Palace, still were managed to play in Europe, but they were demoted to, I guess, a lesser competition. I guess the worry for Everton fans right now is with Roma dropping off in their own league and we end up in the same competition, we don't want to miss out on European competition through a technicality, which would be an absolute disaster, I guess.
Yes, and we also saw Drogheda. They dropped out of European competition altogether as a result of the MCO rules. It's a funny one because clearly Everton have done something. I know 1 or 2 people at Everton, and I really admire the level of professionalism that I see at the club. So I find it hard to believe that Everton have not had some form of communication with UEFA to ensure that both Roma and Everton can participate in the same competition. As to what it is, I'm a finance person, and that's very much a legal solution. But I can't believe that Crystal Palace said they didn't do it because they didn't check their emails. That is the height of tin pottery, in my view, and I can say that as a Brighton fan because we're not exactly Crystal Palace's greatest admirers.
I'm sure they said something similar to when the Dwight McNeil transfer fell through as well. So maybe they need to start checking their inbox a little bit more.
They do indeed, yes. So I would imagine that they have a cunning plan, to quote Baldrick from Blackadder, but nobody seems to know what it is. What I've been saying to people is, at this stage, we've got to keep faith in the owners. They have delivered to date, and we just have to wait to work out what's going to happen over a period of time. Let's get to Europe first. I will. I'll be monitoring this, as will all Evertonians, of course. But I can't believe that an organisation as professional as the Friedkin Group, and having seen the likes of the people that they've recruited since they've acquired control of the club, would let something as potentially amateurish as this slip through their hands.
I mean, we have seen it with the likes of Girona, haven't we, in Manchester City, that they were both able to play. I don't know whether that was some sort of boardroom shuffle, again with Milan and Toulouse, was it? So again, everything just seems to be up in the air. But like you say, there's a lot of football still to be played, and we don't know what's going to happen. Everton could end up in the Champions League. You never know. Two huge games up against Brentford and Liverpool next, all just above Everton on points. So we'll see what happens, I guess.
Absolutely, and you keep your fingers crossed. And at this stage, just enjoy the football. It's a great time to be an Evertonian.
Yeah, just one final question. I guess this is an impossible question because you are the finance man. If you were in charge of Everton's finances, and Everton, obviously, you don't get the choice of whether you qualify for Europe or not. It's just a sport and event, isn't it? And David Moyes is not going to be told, well, don't win this game, so we only finished 10th. But from a finance point of view, if it meant Everton not qualifying for Europe this season, but they were able to build and sustain and, have that kind of 85% threshold for next season, and then build on top of that maybe for more of a push to say Champions League, whether that's realistic or not. Is that what you would kind of suggest, or would you just say, as a purist of a football fan, would you say, no, go for Europe, doesn't matter what competition it is?
I would always take the purist's point of view, because they could get into the Europa League and win it and therefore qualify for the Champions League. The Everton board of directors, they owe a lot to the fans who have been loyal for so many years of underachievement at the club. The fans deserve the opportunity to see Everton play in Europe. And as a fan, you don't care where it's going to be. Even if you have to row to, you have to row to Lithuania to get there for a Thursday night, Everton fans will do it. They will find a way. That's our mentality as football fans. So I would quietly say nothing, but I would be hoping for 9th rather than 8th, or whatever it's going to be.
Oh, I love that answer, Kieran. It was what I expected, to be fair. Even though you are a finance man, I'm sure I knew that you were a true football purist at heart. So fantastic. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, Kieran. Thank you for coming on. Some really great insight into Everton, the accounts, obviously PSR and the transition over to SCR as well. And I guess we'll just watch this space with the European qualification and multi-club model. Hopefully it doesn't come back to bite Everton in the bum, but we will see what happens. Kieran Maguire, thank you for joining us on today's Royal Blue podcast. I've been Ian Croll, and we will be back again soon. See you then.